All right, so we are live. So
Ah,
excited to kick this off. Have another amazing guest speaker here. So excited to have a new friend on the show, Youngrok Kim. I actually got to meet him in person 2 hours ago, and he's kind enough to still want to hang out with me after that. And
well, it's my pleasure, Joel. Thanks
and
for having me.
yeah, no, appreciate it. But Youngrok Kim is part of GREE LP Fund. They've invested in about 60 plus venture capital funds are from Japan. They invest in select venture capital funds ranging from micro VC to established funds worldwide. And, my time just getting to know Youngrok, he's just super involved in the community, super value add. And just really honored to have a new friend. So Youngrok, thanks for coming to the show and excited to learn a lot from you.
Thanks for having me again, Joel. Super excited to having conversation about what we do and all the different topics in the venture capital investment.
Yeah, it's funny. My last guest, Martin Tobias, he was on yesterday, and I thought we were just going to talk about VC, but he's actually 59 years old, and his telomeres, his biology tells him that it indicates that he's biologically the age of a 35-year-old. So it made me, so the conversation went to that direction, and then it made me feel like a slacker.
I want to try that too.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't want to know how old I really am by age, but hopefully, I'm okay.
Lower,
so we never know where these discussions go, and that's what I love about this show is when you don't script it as much, it's just almost like you're having a conversation with a friend. I think a lot of times when you try to script it or plan too much, it just becomes kind of robotic and it just doesn't seem as authentic. So that's why I stopped planning these and just try to go. Just try to run with it. But let's kick this off. Let's talk about you, Youngrok. Let's talk a little bit about your career, your background. I don't think we went that deep when we chatted a few times in terms of what you studied, maybe what you thought you were going to, pursue as a career, and how you ended up here.
Sure. So again, my name is Youngrok Kim. I was born and raised in Korea, but I was actually a huge fan of Japanese rock music when I was in high school students. And early 2000, late time 1990, J-rock was a really big thing. So I decided to go to Japan. Hey, I go to Japan, do a band, things like that. So I went to Japan when I was 18 years old for college, and I studied computer science while doing my band. As you may know, all the healthy Korean male have to serve in army, military services, and I served for 2 years. I had a chance to go to Iraq as well, serving 6-7 months there. And then I just realized, okay, maybe I'm too talented as a guitar player in a rock band. So I just resumed the study. And then back then, I was really interested in finance and computer. So I decided to go and work for technology sector in the finance industry. So my first job was at Goldman Sachs Tokyo office, and it was an engineer. So I was there as an engineer. It was a cloud era. So one of my first job was to install a server, set up the server, things like that. As an engineer, I was there for 6 years, and working for U.S. company in Japan and technology space. You see, and it was from 2009 to 2015. And this is the era where you start seeing all these startups is happening in the US, right? Like Airbnb, Anderson Horowitz was founded in 2009 as well. I think like companies like Uber, Lyft, all those startups start burgeoning around the time. And as an engineer working for a US company, I'm like, okay, I want to try something like that in the US market. So I decided to go to B school, which is one of the easiest way, as we talked about a lot before, right? Easiest way to break into the industry. So I went to the University of Chicago for MBA program, and there I had a chance to try both startup and VC. So my first VC job was at Arch Venture Partners in Chicago, which is a very well known, very influential life science, physical science shop. And I had a chance to, work there as MBA associate for 1 year, and then I got a job at Recruit Holdings, CVC arm of Recruit Holdings, which is one of the largest Japanese companies. It's not necessarily well known outside of Japan, but they are by market cap, they are bigger than, for example, like Honda, Nissan, pretty much a
Hmm.
lot of Japanese companies.
Sure.
And they are a parent company like Indeed, Glassdoor, things like that.
Hmm.
So I was their CBC team, and that's where I started having interest in the fund investment. And I had a chance to both invest in direct startup and the fund, and I really enjoyed working with fund managers and investing funds, right?
Hmm.
And then after a couple of years there, I start seeing this, slew of emerging managers happening in this space. It was around 2019, 18 to 2019, right? And I just saw a number of really talented people starting small funds, micro funds, right? Um, and then I decided, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start launch my own fund only for the emerging managers, right? So
Hmm.
I set up a management company and started raising the capital. And I met this company called GREE, which is another Japanese public company,
Yeah.
um, as my prospective LPs. So long story short, I show up asking for money as a prospective LP, but we had a conversation, and we decided me joining them to lead their US fund of fund practice, because that was around the time that they wanted to start US fund of fund program.
Yeah.
Right? So it was a year and a half ago, 2021. So since I joined them 2021 July, yeah, we've been busy setting up the fund,
Hmm.
creating funds, and getting to know people like yourself.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's a whole
Hmm.
my story. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to go a little deeper. Let me ask you a personal question. Do you miss playing
Sure.
guitar? Did you end up picking the guitar up again?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in B school, I played a game, played the guitar in a band.
Yeah.
I play time to time, but not in a band
Hmm.
or a stage setup.
Yeah.
You play
Yeah.
any
No.
musical instrument?
Yeah. So I want to make a funny parallel because I've opened up about this a few times on the podcast and just in the past. So when I was in high school, I was in a punk rock band. So I
Oh,
played the
there you
drums. Yeah.
go.
I was a drummer, and I kind of joke about this. I mean, I really thought, I was going to pursue like being, a musician. And then my parents are pretty strict being Indian. So my mom was like, look, you're not going to be in a band. You need to go to college and either be a doctor or an
And there you go.
engineer. And
Now you even have a PhD, right?
I know, but there's still some trauma behind that. I think what I'm excited about is the new generation. Even people from Southeast Asia, even people from India. We're seeing a lot of people get into the music and entertainment space, which when I was growing up, it just kind of was not. Um, encouraged as much. And I don't know if you've been seeing this, but we see this a lot. I mean, especially you're from Korea, so
Yeah,
there's K-pop is blowing up. So I think the
exactly.
parents the parents are encouraging their kids to go after what they're interested in, because if you force your kids to study computer science and then they're unhappy, that's not going to get them anywhere either. Right. And I think
Yeah.
but what's really crazy is
Maybe
so
Joel, we got timing.
what's that? Wrong timing. Yeah. And
Maybe you're in the wrong time. Yeah.
yeah, I should have been born a little later, but you also see some parallels as well. So recently, some people have come into my life that invest in the music space. They're partnering with some of the funds that are backed by musicians. So
Right.
I'm starting to kind of see those people come back in. There's a lot of innovation now in music. There's SaaS companies that can like master records using AI. So I'm kind of starting to see that come together, come back, as far as like
For sure.
things coming full circle. But I do still, feel a little regretful that I didn't kind of put more time into the music space. But I think everything kind of flows how it's supposed to flow, and I think there's a lot of cool ecosystems that kind of blend like culture and music, and now investing together. So that's kind of what I'm excited about. But yeah, I mean, it's great
Joel,
to. Mhm.
Joel, I mean, we are gonna live what, another 50, 60 years. We can start it. I think I don't remember the name, but I think one of the founder at Foundry Group
Mhm.
retire the team to just concentrate on his musical career.
Mhm.
So yes, we still have a
Yeah,
chance to
we still got a
go back on
chance. You know,
track.
let's get the
Yeah,
band back.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
we just need to find the VCs and
Mhm.
vocal.
So who's your favorite artist? How did you learn how to play guitar? Did you just take lessons, or did you, because I just learned every single Metallica song and learned every Led Zeppelin song. And that's how I learned. But I don't know if you have like an artist that you prefer listening to kind of like learn how to play guitar.
Definitely Metallica is one of
Mhm.
the top musicians. I still listening to it. I'm in a hotel in New York, right? But in my
Yeah.
home, I have a big, poster of Metallica live,
Yeah.
which they did like 30 years ago, which is bizarre.
Hmm.
And Metallica is one of them. Eric Clapton is my hero. When it comes
Hmm.
to Japan, X Japan is one of my favorite
Hmm.
bands. Just to listen to them a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing that we could probably notice about Metallica is they've evolved, like their style, like their image, and their
Oh
because
yeah.
obviously they got older, they're probably gaining more weight. They've got families now, so but their style still was relevant, and I think that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Whether you're an investor, whether you're a founder, like I was blown by this guy Martin. I mean, he just the way he carries himself, I feel like he's a young college kid that I want to hang out with. He doesn't seem like a senior citizen. I mean, so I think if you're like young at heart and you're still evolving to be relevant, I mean, Metallica's still cool, but they did have to change their style. They changed their hairstyle and the music vibe was different. But I think that's what keeps you relevant, because if you're playing those 80s ballads in like 2022, you may not cater to the younger audience, but then you also have the fan base of like the people like you and I that like fell in love with like Ride the Lightning, right? Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning. I mean, some of those
Yeah.
guitar solos are pretty amazing. So
So I think yeah, to use this analogy in the music industry, right? I think
mhm,
there's always two sides, right? One, as a musician, do I really want to pursue the music that I'm really passionate about, versus
mhm,
do I want to do a music when other people will enjoy, right? And
yeah,
those two things necessarily match all the time. And one of my friends is from my band era in Japan. Is still in the musical industry, so he helps a lot of musicians, and he talks about this topic a lot. Like there's always conflict there, right? And I think
mhm,
the same thing is happening in this venture capital investment, at least for the fund side, or even actually venture capital fund as
mhm,
well. Meaning, so there's a craftsmanship as an investor, right? As a GP, there's an investment strategy that they believe is going to really work, really, right?
yeah,
But at the same time, they have other side of the people on the other side of the table called LP, right? And they may have some other interests or other mandates that are not necessarily match the investment strategy or the interest that the GP has, right? So I think that there is always a balance between what the craftsmanship as an investor and
mhm,
client service provider as a someone who has a fiduciary duty to their investor, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, the LPs could have, I saw a fund that has a charity mandate. So the fund actually has committed to delivering some of their carry to charity.
Hmm.
And
Ah,
obviously the charities, the big institutions that have a charity event, charity mandate, that aligns really well with that strategy more than somebody that's a TikTok VC or like
yeah,
somebody that's a Twitter VC, right? Because of that unique thing. So I think you're right. It's curating and also delivering your product to the right people. Like you don't want to give a steak to a vegetarian, right? If the LP already says, "Hey, I'm looking
exactly.
for this type. I'm a vegetarian." You don't want to say, "Hey, well, we have a steak," or hey, I know you're doing impact, but we're a crypto fund. So I think there's some basic research that you have to do up front as a fund manager to make sure you have, I guess, the LPGP fit.
Yeah, and I think as let's say when we when the players get closer to the founder side, meaning GP, I think they care more about the founder side, right? So they want to
Mhm.
craft their investment strategy and how do they work with the founders, etc. Whereas if you go the other side, they tend to care more about their clients, their LP.
Mhm.
So really funny difference is if you go to homepage of GP, a lot of these, I don't know, Anderson or whoever, I think their mission or branding is all around the founders, right? How they
Yeah.
help the founders and how to find those good investment
Mhm.
opportunities. Whereas if you take a look at the mission of the big fund of fund or institutional investors like Blackstone, they all talk about client, how they serve their clients, right?
Yeah.
Obviously there's no right and wrong answer, right? But
Mhm.
knowing that difference is, I think, is really helpful for both sides to find the right
Yeah.
fit. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, look, if I were to think about it, and maybe you can help me, I'm going to list a few things that could be of interest to the LPs, right? So number one, LPs want to get access to an industry that they don't know about, right? So that maybe
Right.
the LP was working, maybe it's a manufacturing family, they're working in manufacturing for a long time, but they want to learn about software. They're not
Hmm.
they're not equipped to source and screen fintech or B2B SaaS deals. Number one, because they may not be in the ecosystem and they just don't know what's good and what's not. However, if there's a
Right.
fund that's now on Fund 2, Fund 3, and they have an ecosystem, they do community events, they do education around
Yep.
fintech. I think you can build trust with that community, and now you're kind of like almost for your education, you're investing to be able to learn about a sector, and then a lot of times there's co-investment terms. So I think that's the first use case. I think the next one is, you're a large, multi-generational wealthy brand. So you're like the Heinz family, and you have a
Hmm.
mandate, which is, hey, we have to compound capital by certain percentage over time. So these are the criteria that we're looking for. There's probably some qualitative and quantitative criteria as like an institutional single family office. And then I think the other ones are, what else am I missing? So then there's other people that also just want to source deals, and they
Yeah.
think investing in a fund, if you can get in at a small check size, it's a great way to source deals in the industry that you're interested in at scale as well. So it's kind of a sourcing mechanism. Instead of spending $100,000 a year or a couple $100,000 a year to hire analysts, essentially the investment in the fund is the same ticket size, and they're already experts, right? They should be experts, essentially,
Right.
right? To have a
Yeah.
repeatable model to bring in. And the thing is, the emerging fund managers, they have to outperform to survive. So if they don't outperform, they're not, they may not have a fund too, So I think
More
there's that
hustle.
added accountability to kind of deliver those deals and platform to their LPs. But those are a couple three. I don't know if you have any other reasons, and I don't know if there's other mandates that you've seen, but those are like three that quickly come to my mind. But I'm sure you have some, or if you don't, no worries.
No, I think you cover pretty much everything.
Mhm.
So again, when I took this job, I was a CVC at Recruit Holdings, and
Mhm.
their mandate is all strategic, right?
Yeah,
So in the
that's a
investment
good one.
note, yeah, investment note, we don't really say,
Mhm.
hey, this opportunity is attractive in terms of the financial return, XYZ, right?
Mhm.
All we talk about is, by the way, the investment note back then was like 50, 60 pages, right?
Yeah.
And this is all about the company, product, and what kind of strategic opportunities we may have with this particular
Mhm.
company, right? And when it comes to strategic return, it can be anything, right? It can be, as you said, market knowledge, with
Mhm.
co-investment opportunity with other companies, or just hanging out with the friend, the people in that industry, just get to know people, things like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be anything. And I think just about the emerging majors. I think one of the reasons why I really bullish on emerging majors is because it can provide all those mandates, right? At the end of the day, first of all, co-investment opportunity. I mean, they're the one who are on the front line and find the deals for good investment opportunities, right?
Hmm.
So certainly they have they literally every all the emerging majors offer co-investment opportunity because naturally size of the fund is too small for them to invest in a Series B, C, D round, right? So
Hmm.
it's a great opportunity for LPs to have a deal source access through the emerging majors. So co-investments are perfect, right? And market knowledge and industry, insight as well. So all the emerging majors, not all, but most of the emerging majors have certain things, right? And expertise and connections to certain communities, right?
Hmm.
And depending on what LP wants, they can be a great source of the wisdom and insights into those spaces, right? And lastly, from the financial return perspective, as you said, right? So it's a high risk, but also high return potential, right?
Hmm.
So investing in emerging majors can, provide good investment opportunities, insight into certain industrial world sectors, and financial return eventually. It's not
Hmm.
easy to invest in the emerging majors, but once you get it right, I think it's really great opportunities.
Yeah. I've also seen a few LPs because if you think about it, we talked about this earlier, right? So if you just
Yeah,
get involved in a fund that's on Fund Four, that fund is probably has built probably by that stage an institutional reputation and essentially a conglomerate, and it's hard to even get into that fund, because there's a
right.
fixed amount of allocation. A lot of the previous LPs, if they're institutional, they're going to re-up. So they're just because it's a lot
Yeah,
of work to diligence new funds as well. So that's why a lot of the
yeah,
institutions they just re-up. But getting into some of these bigger funds like Sequoia, I told you before, right? There was a larger LP, overseas that just could not get into these tier one funds just because it was so mainstream. So if you think about that, that's very
yeah,
similar in investing in like SpaceX now. If you want to invest in SpaceX, you could buy some secondaries, and
yeah.
but it's still
Good luck
it's still
in the secondary
difficult.
market, right?
Yeah, but it's even difficult to get into, a well-known brand, a established startup now, and the check size is going to be bigger, and you just probably won't get in. But what if you met that same company when they were getting started? I think that's going to really
Exactly.
help you not only just even get in, but then have rights to be able to get an allocation for the next round, for the next vintage as well. So I think it's,
Yeah,
we were
for
talking about
sure.
this earlier, just so many parallels with, building a firm. You were kind of in that process too. I mean, essentially, if you're starting a fund, it's very similar to starting a startup because you got to build a
Right.
website. You got to, obviously do marketing compliantly. You're building an investor database, so it's really all the same steps.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
that's really interesting too.
yeah. And yeah, to just echo what you just said, one of the reasons, another benefits of investing in emerging majors is we don't invest in emerging majors. Sorry, so let me take it back. So we invest in emerging majors who we believe become a next Sequoia, next interest in next,
Yeah.
benchmark, right? So as you said, once they become like fund four, or even fund three, so often they don't have an allocation for new LPs, but as
Hmm.
a LP from the fund one, if we can maintain a good relationship with the funds or GPs over the time, we can probably continue to have allocation, right? So that's another
Yeah.
benefits working with emerging managers. And to your point again, the starting a fund is a starting a new startup, right?
Hmm.
Because it literally, again, I started my own. I was planning. I was trying to start my own fund, so I set up the management company, which is literally setting a company. I built. It was for some reasons I had to set it up with a C corp, which is very similar
Hmm.
to typical startup
Yeah.
corporate structure, right?
Hmm.
So I had to went through that process, and it's very similar. So we are
Yeah.
looking for someone who has experience building something, or
Hmm.
uh, someone who we believe has ability to build a company that can last,
Hmm.
generations.
Yeah. What are some pieces of infrastructure and processes that can help you believe that, right? Because I think in my mind, it's interesting to see if you're on fund two, having a clear roadmap and saying, hey, you know what, when we get to fund three, we're gonna have this type of infrastructure for our fund admin. We're gonna have this level of staff to be able to support our initiatives. Because it
Hmm.
is just as it is even more difficult to manage that capital. If you have more capital, you need resources to be able to deploy at the right scale, right? So maybe you can share some best practices on how a fund two can, slowly think about becoming a Sequoia. Like what's kind of like maybe the steps and things that they should think about as they're growing and evolving.
Yeah, I think it. Let me actually answer this. First of all, when I say next Sequoia, it doesn't necessarily mean funds like a Sequoia in that
Mhm.
size, right?
Yeah.
If I mean, we don't mind investing in
Hmm.
single GP. In fact, a larger number of our investment, our profile funds are single GP, and
Yeah.
a lot of them wants to stay small and nimble,
Yeah.
meaning they don't necessarily want to build a huge team and huge AUM, which we like, right? And on the other hand, there's a different another set of people who wants to build like big shops like Anderson or
Hmm.
Sequoia, right? And what they want to do for the fund too is very different between those two groups of people, right?
Yeah.
So they have to think carefully, like what's their long-term plan, and based on that, they have to come up with a plan to achieve that, right? For the small fund, they don't really need to, hire massive people. It's
Hmm.
more like how to streamline their process more because of the
Yeah.
single GP, right?
Hmm.
On the other hand, the later funds, they have to uh, start thinking succession plan as well, like what kind of people are going to join as the next partners. It's a great
Hmm.
example is actually NFX, which is one of our portfolio funds, right? They are only what, like 5 years old, 6 years old in terms
Hmm.
of since they launched the first fund. Their first fund, vintage is 2017. Now they grew up double digit, around 50 people full time shop, and they
Hmm.
it was started by three GPs, Gigi, Pete, and James, but they
Hmm.
got the new general partners 3 years ago as a part of the expansion plan. So I think that kind of things, the planning and execution, when people want to build a big shop is a really important.
Yeah. I think also, going back to your point about thinking about the profile of people, one really interesting example that I heard is, being a fund manager is almost like being a waiter at a restaurant because you have different stakeholders. Right? You got the customer sitting at the
I like
table.
it.
That's probably your founders. Then you got the kitchen staff, and you have your managers, and then there's probably, you might even be, accountable. There's reputation risk, right? So there's probably the press writing about the restaurant, but you have so many different stakeholders, and you have to kind of try to make everybody happy. if you
Yeah,
if you weigh it too much in one area, that might impact you or it might not. But I think one thing that's really interesting that I've been seeing, we talk about Sequoia. I'm also kind of interested. I read the book around Blackstone, Stephen Schwartz's book, and he talks about just kind of building a conglomerate. And Blackstone, obviously,
mm,
they have a private equity strategy, a real estate strategy, and there's a family office that I've been getting to know for a while, and they also have a venture fund. But that was also kind of an inspiration to them, where they're also offering some type of lower risk options in the real estate space. So instead of going to them only for real estate, if you can provide some of those additional offerings, it's kind of a nice little opportunity for them to kind of invest in those other funds as well and kind of get
yeah,
exposure within one platform. But you make a good point saying that if you do that, you need to be very thoughtful about it because there's a smooth evolution from your fund one and how it evolves to fund two. Like if you're
yeah,
doing, and I like this funny transition because it's so abrupt. But if you're like a climate change fund and then you randomly want to do blockchain and Web3 or crypto, then that can be that may raise some eyebrows. But if you're doing climate
Yeah.
change and now you're evolving into infrastructure, and then you're evolving into prop tech, maybe there's some convergence or some expansion there, and then that turns into real estate, because maybe when you talk to all these developers, maybe there's opportunities to invest in commercial or multifamily through partnerships. But that's a good point that you say, to kind of just maybe think about, if you're going to get to a bigger AUM, why or why not is your strategy changing? And I don't know if you have
Yeah.
any examples of that, kind of following funds, and maybe some good examples of like how they've evolved into kind of a more mature fund into the new larger, AUM size.
Yeah. I mean, so even if they managers keep the size of the funds, small, not necessarily small,
Mhm.
but same, over
Yeah.
time, their AUM is going to grow. Another
Mhm.
example of our portfolio fund is Future Ventures, which
Mhm.
is led by Steve Jervis and Mariana Saenko. And they just, I think they are almost close to fund 3. But fund 1, 2, 3, they kept the same size and same
Mhm.
strategy exactly,
Yeah.
right? And they're going to probably do the same things over time. So,
Mhm.
and their team structure is very nimble and very small. So it's their strategy and it's working for them,
Yeah.
right?
It's repeatable
So
pretty much too.
it's repeatable, exactly. And to your point, if the last 2 years, like last year, 2 years ago, there's a lot of funds who say like, oh yeah, we are investing in crypto, right?
Mhm.
But if you take a look at their backgrounds or a previous fund performance, they didn't really have opportunity or exposure to crypto space, and
Mhm.
that's kind of red flag, right? Maybe, I mean, maybe they are now super familiar with the crypto space and there is opportunity and that's why they want to get in there, but right? But
Mhm.
maybe this is because everyone's talking about Web3, they are also interested in Web3 instead of them being really interested in that space, right? So
Mhm.
repeatability is really key things. I think we believe is a key things to be successful VC.
And what
And we
advice
try to
would you
find
give?
like,
Yeah, no, I
sorry, go
totally
ahead, yeah.
agree. No, I was going to ask you, because you went through the process as well. Just starting a fund from the ground up. So there's a lot of people that have been working in VC as employees or private equity firms for a long time, and they've probably thought about starting a fund. So if you were to mentor them, what would be some advice that you would give them day one? What are like the first few things that they should think about, and how can they go about, deploying capital, and possibly in this climate too, building relationships. And you probably face that firsthand, some interesting ways that people have built your trust, convinced you to give them a second look and spend some time with them. So maybe some tips on where to start, how do you think about your thesis, and then how to maybe build a trusted, LP community.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't want to discourage anyone, but I think first step is to sit down. And I think this is a great time because it's a really tough
Mhm.
environment when it comes to emerging majors raising the capital, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think, including myself, we may want to sit down a little longer and think through this is whether or not the starting a fund is really right things for us, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah, like
it's
what's
a
the
really
why? Like why? Yeah, like that. I think it's a good question. I mean, why? What's the purpose, and what's your why of even starting a fund?
exactly.
How important is that? Yeah.
Yeah, and whether I can execute it, right? Even if we come up with a why part, right? Because again, this is a really tough environment. Tough environment means this is a really tough business, right? Raising a first
Mhm.
fund is a really hard, right? So unless you have, I mean, the new managers has strong why they have to start a fund,
Mhm.
or why they can be successful with his new fund without a strong answer to it, I think it's going to be really tough. So maybe sit down a little longer than you might think it's enough, and just think
Mhm.
through that, and that is going to really help them to come up with a differentiating competitive advantage of them, right? Because as you know, this is the things that I always talk to people about. When it comes to direct investment, I think the good companies and bad companies is sometimes easy, right? You can right away in 10 minutes you can find out right away whether or not this company is good. But when it comes to fund, I think it's just a little narrow because most of the people are really smart and they have some sort of a track record. In other words, 60-70% of the fund managers are good. So from LP's perspective, they are good. So our job is to find among the good managers how to find the great managers, right?
Yeah.
Meaning how to differentiate themselves among the good managers is a really key. So thinking through the why, it's going to be really help to come up with their competitive advantage and outstand among those good managers.
Yeah, I mean, there was an experience in one of my cohorts where, these managers were almost perfect on paper. They come from Harvard and MIT. They worked at like tier one funds. So
Right.
it was so perfect that it was almost boring. And I think that, and that's the table stakes. You got to be talented. You got to have some track record.
Exactly.
Some of the fund managers went to good schools. Some of them didn't. But, I think the storytelling is, in my experience too, what helps is like the narrative of who you are, why you started the fund, like you said, because that's going to get people excited to be on that journey with you. But I think a underrated skill is telling that story in like 30 seconds, because that
Oh
might be
yeah.
the only time you have when you go to like the one of these LP conferences. There's maybe 2 seconds where you meet an LP in the line, so helping them very quickly understand, number one, who you are, and what your offering is. I think that's the
Yeah.
first kind of teaser, even before you send them like a one sheet deck or something. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's Joe, as we discussed. I mean, at least I cannot make a decision in 2 minutes or a minute
hmm
or even 30
yeah.
seconds or even 30 minutes, right?
hmm
So I don't think it's really, I don't want to tell the managers, hey, you have to come up with a skill to tell their stories really
Yeah.
concisely and really attractively in 2 minutes. Because
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone who can convince me to commit and
hmm
write a check in 2 minutes
Yeah.
conversation, right?
hmm
But so that's one of the like my challenges too. How to make it more
hmm
efficient, right? If we can find out the fit in 2 minutes
Yeah.
or in minutes, I think everyone's become
hmm
more happier, right?
Yeah.
Without wasting money and wasting time.
hmm
So
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think
And you
the
gave me
things like
a product enhancement idea too, where it's how about if you can at least get their interest, or at least their attention, for
oh yeah,
30
exactly.
minutes, because then that attention might take you to another meeting and say, look, I know we're busy. I know we're running around, but hey, here's my business card. Let's set up a 30-minute quick session to kind of learn a little more. So it's kind of like layers, right? You got like the
Yeah,
attention, and then I think it's like, yeah, if I were to think about it, it's like attention. That's like almost like an ad. It's like, hey, here's what I am. Do you want to see more? And then the second step is like maybe slight interest, and then I think it's like more interest, serious interest. It's like at least eight
yeah, yeah,
levels
yeah,
of interest, and then it's like diligence, I would say. Well, maybe you can tell me this. Maybe you can walk me through whatever you're allowed to share, like the typical, and this is good for people that are aspiring fund to funds too, like the process of sourcing and screening funds, and then maybe just the diligence process, and whatever you're allowed to say in general terms, or just typically have you've seen funds diligence, and for me, it's, in my opinion, it's been the same as VCs screening startups, but maybe there's some other nuances that you have insight on.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you. It's pretty much similar, right? I
Mhm.
sourced the opportunities through mostly warm intro,
Yeah.
like startup investment, right?
hmm
So I source those deals, and we, as a team, take a call, and get to know the managers better, and decide whether we want to spend more on the due diligence, right? And once
Mhm.
everything looks fine and great, we close the deal, right?
Yeah.
One big difference between startup, a direct investment, and fund investment is the timing, right?
Mhm.
When it comes to startup investment, you have I think, a shorter amount of time window, right? You have to close it. But when it comes to
Mhm.
fund, as you know, typical most of the funds, they keep the fund open for 1 year. I mean, emerging majors, right? Unless it is a super
Yeah.
competitive funds, meaning they can raise the capital even in 1 year or even longer than 1 year, right?
Mhm.
Meaning, even if we believe the fund is not good at this point, the fund may become really attractive 6 months later, right? Then we can
Mhm.
revisit, right? So it's really, I think this is why people say building the relationship is very important,
Yeah.
because even if the fund is good, sometimes the timing is not right for both
Mhm.
of us, right? Both of the parties, and then
Yeah.
it doesn't work. But when fund is good, the timing is right, then we
Mhm.
can move forward, right?
Yeah.
So again, to summarize, pretty much similar to sort of investment plus this time component to the fund investment.
Yeah. And then I think the metrics are different too, right? For the fund
Oh yeah,
versus startups. So, obviously most of these funds are not going to have DPI, maybe some TVPI, obviously some multiples on invested capital. Are there any other KPIs or metrics from like the hard quantitative side that you guys look at when you're evaluating? I mean, I see almost the emerging managers, almost like the seed stage startups of fund investing. But are there any other interesting? I think you probably look at their budget, like how they're managing their balance sheet, But
yeah.
anything else, maybe as an emerging LP that they should look at?
Yeah, I mean, even if they don't have a track, well, first of all, I don't think we invest in any emerging majors who don't have any track record for
Yeah.
the fund. So at least they
Hmm.
have some sort of a track record, investment track record. I mean, as an
Hmm.
angel or in a previous fund, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Or even if they don't have a track record as an angel, they for that specific fund, we waited until the first close so they can actually start deploying the capital and prove what they can execute and deliver what they promised on the deck,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So in other words, we have some sort of track record, but in a different form. Now, meaning we meet a large number of emerging majors, meaning we can compare certain majors to the rest of
Hmm.
the groups, right?
Yeah.
So that actually gives us a good snapshot of, even if there's no DPI, no one has a DPI, but like
Nobody's got it. Yeah.
let's compare the TVPI, right? So
Yeah.
this major has this TVPI in this vintage,
Hmm.
whereas these managers has other higher or lower TVPI in the same vintage.
Yeah.
So we can do the comparison, right?
Hmm.
Which gives us okay, which managers have a potential to potentially more competitive.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You're almost creating what the public markets use. They use the benchmark. So when they look at their own portfolio, their public securities, they compare it to like the S&P 500 as like the benchmark. So it sounds like
right.
you've kind of created your own internal benchmark
We're
after
trying
looking
to,
at all the
yeah,
data. Yeah. So you kind of have your own personal benchmark because that also helps you benchmark yourself as a fund to fund, and it also gives you some screening criteria with new funds that are
exactly.
coming in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah. And
helpful.
screening is really difficult because as we just talked about, discussed, most majors are really good. Like
Hmm.
67% of majors are good.
Yeah.
But sometimes just timing is not right. So when it comes to screening,
Hmm.
it's not necessarily like find well, obviously finding out those 30%, 40% we probably never invested in fund is screening one part of the screening. But
Yeah.
through the screening, we just want to get to know those managers better for future
Hmm.
opportunities, right? Because
Yeah.
again, going back to our earlier topic, we have our LP too. Our LP has their own mandates,
Hmm.
and we're gonna add more LPs who have different mandates, right? And then
Hmm.
today's LP the LPs that we have may not interested in whatever funds that we just
Hmm.
met, but
Yeah.
like 6 months later, we may meet another LP who might be interested in that
Hmm.
fund, right? So yeah, so screening is not necessarily filtering out, but get to know more managers and find a
Yeah.
fit down the road.
What are your thoughts on the creator economy and like a lot of the fund managers building a brand? I've been very inspired. To be honest, I think the best type of mentorship needs to go both ways. You need to learn from people that obviously are much more experienced than you, but you can learn a lot from the Gen Zs and the people that are creating content and community.
Yeah,
It's inspired me to start doing some community building on TikTok
you
and
should.
thinking about how I can build that platform and get better distribution, but also just kind of learn about those other platforms. And some of the funds that we've both looked at have been really good at that. So kind of
Oh
what
yeah.
what do you where do you see that evolving? And I'll start with mine. I believe that like most funds,
Hmm.
the 60 to 7%, even the good ones, you're investing in that human. It's not, there's
Right.
Sequoia, which is us obviously, an institutional conglomerate, but a lot of these funds, the brand is really that person. And I'm seeing a lot of brands change the name of the brand to not the fund name, but when you think about like obviously this is a little drastic, but when you think about Elon Musk, he's Elon, right? Even though he has SpaceX and all these other
Yeah.
companies, you're essentially backing Elon. And not to go that drastic with that much of a comparison that like all of the funds we're investing in are like Elon, but just if you have any other comments on just kind of the fund managers that are building podcasts and community, they're creating short form content. Any observations on that?
I mean, first of all, Joel, I mean, I let me know if there's anything I can help you. I'm a huge fan of this brand building exercise, and I think in the
Yeah.
future, everyone really has to, you know, let's say there's a two people, right? One person with a brand, the other one person doesn't have a brand. Who's gonna have a better chance in terms
Yeah.
of winning the businesses, everything, right? I think the former person,
Hmm.
right? I always try to become more influent, put more content into the social media. That has been my New Year's resolution in the past 10 years, but I never get that done. Hopefully this year I get that done. I get that done some. But yes, I think it's really important. And there's a really interesting data points. There is a there's a so we did some data analysis that about the brand awareness of the VC funds, right,
Hmm.
versus the size of the funds. Not surprisingly, more awareness,
Hmm.
higher, larger fund size.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, no brand example is Andreessen Horowitz, right?
Yeah.
Their brand awareness is incredible, and now no one, I don't know their performance of the fund, like exact performance,
Hmm.
but at this time, it doesn't really matter how good they are. They're
Yeah.
Anderson. Everyone wants to get in Anderson. Why? Because it's
Hmm.
the Anderson. They build these incredible brands, right?
Yeah.
And they are winning in this space. So I think building a brand as a VC
Hmm.
is becoming more and more important. And I actually talk about this topic a lot with our managers too.
Hmm.
And unless there's a specific strategy to build a
Hmm.
shop without brands, go for it. But if they don't have any view on the brand, they should build brands.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And Harry,
including
the
myself. Yeah.
emerging one, I would say one of the emerging ones is Harry Stebbings. He's built a huge
Oh,
media platform. He's on TikTok now, and I think you can still compete because it's a heavy production effort. And it's a discipline. So there was a saying that I heard a few weeks ago, which still sticks with me, just 2 weeks ago, and it's freedom is on the other side of discipline, right? So you have to kind
right.
of do it over and over. It's your craft, and there's a
Yeah.
discipline to it. And I think those are the people that have kind of compounded their community because every week, whether it's Tuesday or Thursday, you have your your time box where you're going to be
Right.
doing community building. And then I've heard a lot of other strategies too. Some of the fund managers that you and I know, some of them, what they'll do is, and this is an interesting strategy. They'll film a lot of short form content one time a month, like just batch it. And then they get somebody to edit it. And then once you have all of that filmed, then you can get somebody behind the scenes, maybe a virtual assistant, to kind of push that out. But you got to still have that FaceTime, and everybody doesn't want to do that. It's a lot of work, especially even on Twitter, being active, so I think just you kind of doing that extra work sometimes gives you an edge versus the other people that don't want to. So.
I completely agree with you. I actually started my own podcast 2 years ago in Korean and Japanese, and I started a newsletter and podcast, and I discontinued podcast. Shame on me, I know, but I know how hard it is. It's commitment.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've been doing the newsletters since then, so it's been 2 years. Every week, I write an article about the venture capital investment in Korean and Japanese again. So it's been really great. It really opens the door to a lot of different people that I wouldn't have known otherwise, right? So hopefully I can, build a little more discipline to continue. Resume the podcast and other media like yourself.
Yeah, and you got to be comfortable with the medium too. So I do like writing, but I just feel sometimes it's a much more daunting task because you got to sit down and write it. Even though I think I could probably crank something out quicker, I just don't get to it. So I haven't been that good at writing. But then the video content, the reason why we're live is just not because I want to go live, but I just don't have time to download it,
That's smart,
edit it.
Yeah.
So I think if so I just figure it out. Hopefully, I've just kind of done so many of these. My mindset is just, let's just pretend we're having a fun conversation. And I think it just happens much more organically. But I know we're coming up on time. I mean, look, Youngrok, I'm really glad we became friends. I'm glad that we got to spend some time earlier today. And, hope you have a fun trip in New York, and we'll do some cool stuff together in the next couple months. We'll brainstorm. And thanks for sharing all of your wisdom with the community. I think
thanks for sharing all your wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, and take care. We'll catch up soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks again, man.
Yeah, of course.